Welcome to fact number 1. And let's rip the Band-Aid off right away. Your HOA's governing documents are the single most important weapon in the war over rentals. Think of them as the HOA's Bible, Constitution, and IKEA manual, all mashed into one painfully boring but legally binding text. They're what tell you whether you can rent your house to a sweet family of 4, or if you're about to receive a cease and desist email typed in Comic Sans from your HOA board president. Now, here's the deal. If your governing documents say no rentals, your HOA has the power to enforce it. Period. End of discussion. You might think you bought freedom, a patch of land where you call the shots. But no, my friend. You bought into a miniature kingdom where the king and queen are the board, and the Constitution is a stack of paperwork thicker than your grandma's fruitcake. But let's pump the brakes. These documents, called CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, bylaws, articles of incorporation, and sometimes random resolutions, aren't entirely evil. They exist to keep your neighborhood from turning into a lawless wasteland. Imagine if everyone painted their house neon orange, parked their boats on the lawn, or built a chicken coop in the driveway. Without governing documents, your dream community would turn into a Craigslist free-for-all in about 48 hours. So yes, they serve a purpose, but here's the kicker. In Delaware, these documents are binding contracts. You agreed to them the moment you signed on the dotted line at closing. And guess what? Whether you actually read them or not doesn't matter. Spoiler alert, 99% of homeowners didn't. The only people who read every word are lawyers and that one neighbor who treats the HOA newsletter like their personal blog. Now let's talk about enforceability. Delaware law takes governing documents seriously. They're not just rules, like don't eat chips on the couch. They're recorded with the county and treated with nearly the same weight as state law, at least within your community's borders. In practice, this means if the CC&Rs ban rentals, then no amount of sweet-talking, loophole hunting, or begging is going to change the fact that your Airbnb side hustle is dead in the water. But here's where it gets interesting. What if your governing documents don't say anything about rentals? Silence doesn't equal prohibition. Just because the HOA board is annoyed with the college kids throwing parties next door doesn't mean they can suddenly snap their fingers and ban all rentals. No. If it's not written down, they have to go through the official process to create or amend that rule. That usually involves a homeowner vote. And trust me, nothing brings neighbors out of the woodwork like a rental restriction vote. Suddenly, the guy who hasn't attended an HOA meeting in 5 years shows up like it's the Super Bowl. But let's not sugarcoat it. HOA documents are confusing. Some are laser precise, like no lease shall be less than 30 days. Others are maddeningly vague, like properties must be used for residential purposes only. Residential purposes? That could mean anything from a nuclear family to your buddy Steve couch surfing for 3 months. And guess who gets to interpret that vagueness? The HOA board. Buckle up. Now let's get practical. Where do you even find these sacred scrolls? If you bought a home in Delaware, you should have received them at closing. If you didn't, there are a couple of options. Your HOA's website, assuming it's not still hosted on GeoCities circa 2001, your county's Recorder of Deeds office. Many Delaware counties now post these documents online because apparently even governments realized people hate standing in line for 3 hours. Or you can directly ask your HOA. Just don't expect a speedy reply. You'll likely get a response somewhere between next fiscal quarter and when pigs fly. So why does this matter so much? Because every single argument, lawsuit, and screaming match about rentals boils down to one question. What do the governing documents say? That's it. That's the ballgame. Want to rent your home? Check the docs. Want to stop your neighbor from running a frat house? Check the docs. Wondering if you can rent to your cousin for 6 months while she figures life out? Yep, check the docs. And let's sprinkle in some irony here. Attorney Robert Valley An actual expert in Delaware HOA law once said homeowners associations are the most basic form of government in Delaware. Translation, you didn't escape politics when you moved into that charming subdivision. You just joined a smaller, pettier version of Congress. Only this time, instead of debating healthcare and budgets, you're fighting over mailbox paint colors and whether renting to tourists makes your block look like a Motel 6. But here's the part that really makes governing documents both fascinating and infuriating. They're not carved in stone. They can be changed, amended, if the board and homeowners follow the proper steps. That's where people either feel empowered or totally betrayed. Imagine buying a house because rentals were allowed only to watch the HOA vote them out 6 months later. Ouch. It's like signing up for Netflix and finding out they just deleted all your favorite shows. So here's the bottom line for fact number 1. Your HOA's governing documents are the ultimate authority on whether rentals are allowed. If they ban rentals, it's enforceable. Period. End of discussion. You might think you bought freedom, a patch of land where you call the shots, but no, my friend. You bought into a miniature kingdom where the king and queen are the board, and the Constitution is a stack of paperwork thicker than your grandma's fruitcake.
So you've read your HOA's governing documents, or at least skimmed them while binging Netflix, and you discovered silence. Nothing in there about banning rentals. You breathe a sigh of relief, thinking, yes, my Airbnb empire is safe. But hold on, because this is where HOAs pull out their favorite party trick, the amendment. Let's get one thing straight. Just because your HOA board wants to ban rentals doesn't mean they can wave a wand and make it happen overnight. Delaware law is pretty clear about this. Rules need to be properly amended to be enforceable. Translation: if the board skips steps, ignores procedures, or tries to sneak something shady past the homeowners, their shiny new rental ban could crumble faster than a sandcastle at Rehoboth Beach. Now, how does an amendment actually happen? Picture your HOA as a tiny version of Congress, except instead of C-SPAN coverage, it's a Zoom call where half the participants forget to unmute themselves. To change the governing documents, the board typically has to propose the amendment, usually drafted with the help of an attorney because nobody wants legalese written by Bob from Lot 12, notify homeowners, giving everyone fair warning that a vote is coming, no surprise bans should appear like Amazon packages on your porch, hold the vote, often requiring a supermajority of homeowners, think 67% or even 75%, depending on your community's rules, record the amendment with the county, making it official and enforceable. Miss any of these steps, and congratulations, you've just created a legally wobbly mess. A homeowner with enough determination or spite could challenge the ban in court and win. Here's a Delaware twist. Under the Delaware Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, or DUCIOA, associations have specific obligations to follow their bylaws when adopting amendments. That means if your HOA claims, "We voted last Tuesday in the clubhouse, rentals are banned, sorry," but they didn't have the right quorum, proper notice, or majority, their rule is about as valid as monopoly money. But don't pop the champagne yet. Most HOAs know this, and the savvy ones follow the steps carefully. Still, there's always that one overeager board that treats procedure like it's optional. And when they mess up, boom, you might find yourself with a golden loophole to keep renting. Now, let's zoom out. Why does this matter? Because amendments change the game mid-match. You could have bought your house with full rental rights, only to watch them vanish because the majority of your neighbors decided they don't want transients next door. On the flip side, you could have moved into a no-rental zone, but then the HOA amends the docs to allow leases after homeowners push for more flexibility. It cuts both ways. And here's where things get spicy: grandfathering. In many Delaware cases, if an HOA adopts a new restriction, existing rental owners might be grandfathered in, meaning they can keep renting under the old rules even while new owners can't. But this depends on how the amendment is written. Some HOAs play nice, others slam the door shut on everyone at once. If you're not paying attention, you could be caught off guard. Let's throw in an analogy. Imagine you joined a gym where the rule said, you can bring a guest. 6 months later, management changes the rules. No more guests allowed. Fair enough, but if you already bought a year-long Bring a Guest membership, you'd be furious, right? That's what happens when HOAs amend rental rules without carving out exceptions for current owners. It feels like you bought one thing and got another. But here's the thing. Courts often side with the HOA, as long as the amendment was done correctly. Delaware judges tend to uphold community votes if the process followed the book. Why? Because when you bought your home, you agreed to live by the rules of the collective. It's like Survivor, but with less sunscreen and way more lawn disputes. And let's not ignore the drama. HOA amendment votes bring out more passion than a playoff game. Picture it, one camp arguing, rentals ruin property values, and the other yelling, this is America! I should do what I want with my house. The meeting drags on, snacks run out, tempers flare, and somewhere in the back row someone mutters, we should have moved to a non-HOA community. Now, here's your Delaware homeowner survival tip. If you hear whispers that your HOA wants to amend the documents, get involved early. Don't wait until the ink is dry and you're locked out of renting. Show up at meetings, read the proposed language, and this is key, vote. You'd be shocked how often major decisions swing on just a handful of ballots. That neighbor who skips every meeting, he's the reason the no rental amendment passed by one vote. But let's also address the myth. Some people think, if my HOA didn't ban rentals when I bought, they can't change it now. Wrong. As long as the process is followed, they can absolutely change the rules. That's the reality of HOA living. You're part of a collective, and the collective can decide to rewrite the playbook. Now, here's the flip side. If they botch the process, you've got ammo. Courts in Delaware and elsewhere have struck down HOA rules when boards didn't meet quorum, skipped notices, or failed to properly record amendments. That's why it pays to know not just what the rules say, but how they were made. So let's recap this beast. Amendments are the HOA's way of rewriting the rule book. To be valid, they need proper notice, a vote, and recording. Delaware law enforces procedure. Mess it up, and the rule may not stick. Amendments can strip or grant rental rights mid-ownership. Grandfathering is possible, but not guaranteed. Homeowners who don't show up to vote basically hand the keys to the loudest voices in the room. Bottom line is, amendments are everything. They're the difference between running your house like a B&B and being stuck with a mortgage and no rental income. If you're not watching the amendment process closely, you might wake up one day and find your HOA just outlawed your side hustle while you were busy watching cat videos. So the board played by the rules and passed a shiny new amendment, but how strict can they really get? Can they cap rentals, create waiting lists, or make you jump through hoops like you're auditioning for America's Got Talent? Let's dive into fact number 3.
All right, so your HOA pulled off a proper amendment, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and now they're coming for rentals. But instead of swinging the ban hammer like Thor, many HOAs in Delaware take a sneakier approach. Rental caps and waiting lists. Think of it like a hotel with a maximum occupancy. The HOA is basically saying, sure, you can rent out your place, but only if we haven't hit our quota. Otherwise, take a number and stand in line. Sounds crazy, right? But this is actually one of the most common tactics HOAs use to control the chaos without looking like total villains. And make no mistake, it's all about math. How many rentals are too many? 5% of the neighborhood? 10? 25? Every HOA seems to think they've cracked the magical formula for keeping peace and property values intact. Spoiler alert, it's not really about math. It's about politics, perception, and just a dash of paranoia. Let's break it down. Say you live in a 100-unit condo community in Delaware. The board sets a 10% rental cap. That means only 10 units can be rented out at any given time. If you're number 11 in line, sorry, you're benched until someone else sells, stops renting, or wins the lottery and moves out. That's when the waiting list comes in. Yes, some HOAs actually keep a literal list of homeowners waiting for their chance to rent. It's like the DMV meets Airbnb. Here's where it gets spicy. These caps can dramatically impact your finances. Imagine buying your dream condo, thinking you can rent it out for passive income when work takes you overseas. But oops, cap's full. You're stuck paying the mortgage, HOA fees, and property taxes without rental income to cover the load. Cue the stress headaches. And it's not just you. Caps can mess with the whole community. Fewer rental options means higher demand, which can drive prices up for renters and make the neighborhood less accessible for people who can't afford to buy. On the flip side, supporters argue that caps keep property values high for owners because banks and lenders prefer communities with a higher owner occupancy rate. Why? Because they believe owners take better care of homes than renters. Harsh? Yes. True? Sometimes. Now, let's talk Delaware specifics. Rental caps and waiting lists are usually spelled out directly in the HOA's governing documents or adopted through proper amendments. They don't come out of thin air. An HOA can't just say, from now on, only 5 rentals allowed. Deal with it. Nope. They need to follow the same legal amendment process we covered in fact number 2. Otherwise, the rule is about as enforceable as a toddler's bedtime. But when done correctly, these caps can seriously reshape a community, and they come with quirks. Lottery systems. Some HOAs run a lottery if multiple owners want to rent when a slot opens. Yes, renting your house can come down to dumb luck, like winning concert tickets. Expiration dates. Certain caps give rental rights for a set number of years. After that, back to the waiting list you go. Prioritization. Some HOAs give priority to owners facing hardships, like military deployment, job transfers, or medical issues. Others, first come, first serve. Brutal. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Caps and waiting lists create winners and losers. Imagine 2 neighbors. Sarah bought her condo early, got her rental rights, and now enjoys steady income. Tom, who bought later, can't rent at all because the cap is maxed out. Same community, same fees, totally different rules. Fair? That depends on whether you're Sarah or Tom. Here's a fun analogy. It's like trying to get into an exclusive nightclub. If you're on the list, the bouncer lets you through and you're sipping cocktails inside. If you're not, you're freezing in line watching everyone else have a good time. Except in this case, the cocktails are rental checks and the freezing is your unpaid mortgage. Now, Delaware law doesn't set a magic number for rental caps. It all comes down to what the HOA adopts. Some communities keep caps low, 5 to 10%, to project a stable, owner-occupied vibe. Others are more generous, allowing up to 30% rentals. And some don't cap at all because they've realized fighting rentals is like trying to stop a toddler from finding candy. It's a losing battle. Here's the kicker, though. Caps and lenders love the caps. If your community has a low rental percentage, it's easier for buyers to get FHA loans, conventional financing, and favorable insurance rates. Why? Because lenders think owners are less risky than tenants. So when your HOA says we're capping rentals to protect property values, it's not just the line. They're playing the long game to keep financing options open and resale value strong. But let's get real. Caps also spark drama. Nothing fires up a neighborhood meeting like arguing over who gets to rent and who doesn't. Some owners see it as protection. Others see it as an attack on their property rights. And the waiting list, that's where grudges are born. People keep tabs on who's ahead, who dropped out, and who might be sneaking around the rolls. It's like a neighborhood soap opera, and everyone's watching. So what's the homeowner takeaway? Check your spot on the list. If you're thinking of renting, find out whether there's a cap and whether you're anywhere near the top. It totally matters. Understand the math. A 10% cap in a 300-unit community gives you way more breathing room than a 10% cap in a 20-unit townhouse cluster. Context matters. Push for transparency. HOAs should keep clear records of who's renting, how many slots are filled, and where you stand in line. If they don't, that's a red flag. At the end of the day, rental caps and waiting lists are the HOA's way of saying, we'll tolerate renters, but only in carefully measured doses. It's neighborhood control disguised as math. And whether you benefit or lose out depends on timing, luck, and just how obsessed your board is with playing hotel manager. Bottom line for fact number 3, rental caps limit the number of homes that can be rented at once. Waiting lists keep would-be landlords on standby. Delaware HOAs must amend documents properly to adopt them. They protect financing and property values, but create division. Your ability to rent might literally come down to your place in line. So, caps and lists are one thing, but what if your HOA doesn't care about numbers? They care about time. That's when minimum lease terms come into play. And trust me, the difference between 30 days and 12 months is a bigger deal than you think. Welcome to fact number 4.
Okay, so your HOA didn't slam the door shut on rentals, and maybe they're not playing games with caps or waiting lists. You're thinking, great, I'm in the clear. Time to fire up Airbnb, slap some fresh sheets on the bed, and rake in that sweet rental income. Not so fast, my friend. Enter the next HOA power move, lease length requirements. This is where things get really sneaky. Instead of saying no rentals allowed, an HOA in Delaware might simply say, sure, rent your place, but only if the lease is at least 6 months, or 12, or sometimes even longer. Suddenly, your dream of turning your beach house into a weekend getaway machine dies faster than an unattended funnel cake on the Rehoboth boardwalk. Why do they do this? Simple. Short-term rentals drive them nuts. Imagine you live in a peaceful cul-de-sac sipping morning coffee when a new group of strangers rolls in every Friday night with coolers, inflatable flamingos, and questionable music choices. Next week, it's a bachelor party. The week after that, it's college kids who think quiet hours is just a suggestion. Suddenly, your neighborhood doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a hotel. And your HOA? They're not having it. So they put in a rule. No rentals shorter than 6 months or sometimes 12 months. That way, anyone moving in is less likely to be a weekend rager and more likely to be a long-term resident who at least pretends to care about the community garden. It's their way of controlling the vibe, keeping things stable, predictable, and frankly, quieter. Now, let's look at Delaware specifically. Attorney Robert Valihura, yes, the same HOA law guru we mentioned earlier, has said over and over, it all depends on the governing documents. If your HOA's CC&Rs or bylaws set a minimum lease term, it's enforceable. If they don't, and the board tries to wing it with just a policy or resolution, that's when the claws come out. They need to amend the documents properly, see fact number 2, for it to stick. Otherwise, you could challenge it. But when these minimums are in place, they change the entire rental game. Let's paint some scenarios. Scenario 1, the 30-day minimum. At first glance, this seems generous. You can't do weekend Airbnbs, but you can rent to traveling nurses, business consultants, or families between homes. It still allows some flexibility, but it keeps out the party crowd churn. Not terrible, but still restrictive. Scenario 2, the 6-month minimum. Now we're talking serious commitment. Your potential renters are probably people relocating, families waiting for a new build to finish, or long-term snowbirds. It wipes out almost all vacation rentals, but you still have some market left. Scenario 3, the 12-month minimum. This is the nuclear option. At that point, you're basically running your house like a traditional landlord. No short stays, no seasonal gigs, no flexibility. It's the HOA's way of saying, if you want to rent, fine, but we want full-time neighbors, not tourists. And trust me, the difference between these frame times is massive. A 30-day minimum might cut your pool of renters in half. A 12-month minimum, you're down to long-term tenants only. That can make or break your rental income plan. Here's a fun analogy. Think of lease minimums like dating rules. A 30-day lease is like casual dating, easy in, easy out. A 6-month lease is a solid relationship with a few holidays together. A 12-month lease? Congratulations, you're basically married. And once you're locked in, breaking up is messy for everyone.
But let's not just dunk on HOAs here. There are reasons they enforce these minimums, and some of them are legit. Stability. Fewer move-ins and move-outs mean fewer disruptions. Long-term renters are more likely to meet neighbors, follow rules, and treat the place with respect. Property values. Believe it or not, lenders actually look at lease minimums. A community full of weekend rentals can be flagged as risky. Minimums reassure banks that the community has stable residents. Noise and nuisance control. This one's the obvious one. Nobody wants strangers partying at 2 a.m. when their toddler is trying to sleep. Insurance benefits. Insurance companies also like stable communities. Too many short-term rentals? Premiums go up. Minimum leases, premiums might stay reasonable. But of course, there's the flip side. For owners, lease minimum rules can feel like a straitjacket. What if you only need to rent for 3 months while you're away on a work assignment? Too bad. What if your cousin wants to rent your place for the summer? Nope. The HOA isn't interested in your cousin's vacation plans. They're interested in community character. And here's where Delaware owners need to be extra cautious. Always read the fine print. Some HOAs sneak in no subleases clauses, meaning you can't even carve out part of your unit. Others require leases to be approved by the board before tenants can move in. Miss a requirement, and you're on the hook for fines, legal fees, or worse. So what happens if you break the minimum lease rule? Brace yourself. HOAs can, and often do, fine owners for non-compliance. They can also deny renters access to community amenities like the pool, gym, or clubhouse. In extreme cases, they can even take legal action to force the tenant out. Yes, it can get that ugly. So what's the smart play for Delaware owners? Know the lease minimum. Before you buy, check if it's 30 days, 6 months, or 12 months. It could make or break your investment strategy. Plan accordingly. If you're banking on short-term rental income, a 12-month minimum is basically game over. Rethink the math. Stay compliant. Don't try to skirt the rules by calling your lease a friendship agreement or house guest arrangement. HOAs have seen it all, and they're not buying it. Lobby for change. If you think the rule is unfair, gather like-minded owners and push for an amendment. It's tough, but it happens. At the end of the day, lease length requirements are the HOA's way of saying, we're not banning rentals, but we're making sure they look and feel like real homes, not revolving door motels. Whether you see that as protection or punishment depends entirely on your perspective and your bank account. Bottom line for fact number 4. Lease minimums are one of the most powerful rental restrictions HOAs use. They can range from 30 days to 12 months or more. Short-term rentals are usually the first casualty. They protect stability and property values, but crush flexibility. In Delaware, they're enforceable if properly written into governing documents. So, the HOA locked down how long renters can stay. But what if they go even further and demand that you live in your house before you're allowed to rent it? That's the infamous owner occupancy rule, and it's coming up in fact number 5.
So your HOA didn't completely ban rentals, they didn't strangle you with rental caps, and maybe they even gave you a reasonable lease length requirement. You're feeling optimistic, right? Well, don't celebrate yet, because here comes the HOA's next trick, the dreaded owner occupancy rule. What's that, you ask? Simple. The HOA says, sure, you can rent your house, but only if you've lived in it first. It's like the board is saying, prove you're one of us before you dare invite outsiders in. Welcome to the HOA version of a hazing ritual. Let's get real about what this means. In Delaware communities, owner occupancy requirements can look like this. You must live in your unit for at least 1 or 2 years before renting it. You must maintain your home as a primary residence even while renting part of it out. You can only rent out your home if you've demonstrated that you're an engaged member of the community. Translation, you show up, pay your dues, and don't rock the boat. On paper, this sounds harmless. After all, who doesn't want homeowners invested in their neighborhood? But in practice, it's a curveball that can wreck your financial plans faster than a seagull stealing French fries at the boardwalk. Let's play out a scenario. You buy a shiny new condo in Wilmington, thinking, hey, I'll live here a year, then rent it out and move closer to work. But wait, the HOA requires 2 years of owner occupancy before renting. Suddenly, your plan is toast. Or worse, you bought the place purely as an investment, only to realize you can't legally rent it at all because you never lived there. That's the nightmare version. Now, why do HOAs enforce these rules? It boils down to 2 big reasons. Number 1, stability and community vibes. HOAs want residents who stick around, plant flowers, wave at neighbors, and attend the summer barbecue. They think owner-occupants are more likely to treat the community like home and less like a temporary stopover. It's the HOA's way of saying, we want neighbors, not nomads. And number 2 is protecting property values and financing. Banks and lenders love owner-occupied communities. Why? Because owner-occupants statistically default on loans less, maintain their homes better, and file fewer insurance claims. When an HOA boasts a high owner occupancy rate, it's easier for buyers to qualify for FHA loans, which means more sales and higher property values. In other words, lenders think owners care, renters don't. Sounds nice in theory, right? But here's the flip side. These rules can feel like an infringement on your basic property rights. You bought it, you pay the mortgage, you should decide whether to live in it, rent it, or turn it into a cat cafe. Okay, maybe not that last one. But the HOA, they're saying not so fast. Your ownership comes with conditions. And Delaware homeowners need to understand this loud and clear. If the governing documents include owner occupancy requirements, they are enforceable. Courts tend to uphold them as long as they're properly written and adopted. The logic is simple. When you signed that contract at closing, you agreed to play by the HOA's rules, even if you didn't bother to read them. And let's be honest, you didn't. But here's where things get interesting. What if the HOA tries to add an owner occupancy rule later through amendment? That's where the fireworks start. Remember fact 2, amendments require proper process. If the HOA didn't follow the procedure, proper notice, homeowner vote, and recording, you might have grounds to challenge the rule. And even if the amendment passes, some courts lean toward grandfathering. That means if you already owned your home when the rule kicked in, you might be exempt. Translation, your neighbor who bought later is stuck, but you get a pass. Now, let's stir in some practical headaches these rules cause. Military families often get trapped. If you're deployed and want to rent your home during service, an owner occupancy rule could block you. Some HOAs carve out exceptions, but not all. Investors avoid communities with these restrictions like the plague. Why buy a place you can't rent? That limits demand, which could actually hurt property values long term, exactly the opposite of what the HOA wants. Relocation issues, job transfer, family emergency, too bad. Unless you've lived there long enough, you're stuck with either selling or leaving your place empty. Want an analogy? Think of it like getting a driver's license. Owner occupancy rules are the HOA saying, you can't drive this car, rent your house, until you've held your permit, lived here, for a set time. Meanwhile, your car sits in the driveway collecting dust while you pay insurance, gas, and repairs. It's frustrating, but it's the rule of the road. And let's not pretend HOAs enforce this gently. Break the owner occupancy rule, and you're looking at fines, violation notices, and possibly even legal action to shut down your rental. Some HOAs will deny your tenants access to amenities. No pool, no gym, no clubhouse. Others will slap daily fines until you give up. The message is clear. Play by our rules or pay up. So what can you do if you're staring down an owner occupancy clause in Delaware? Read the fine print. Some rules require a single year, others stretch to 2 or more. Know exactly what you're dealing with. Ask for exceptions. Military service, medical hardship, or job relocation are sometimes carved out. Don't assume. Ask. Plan ahead. If your plan was buy, move in for 6 months, then rent, make sure that aligns with the HOA's requirements. Otherwise, rethink your strategy. Challenge sloppy amendments. If the rule was added later and the board messed up the process, you might have a legal case. Bottom line is owner occupancy rules are the HOA's way of gatekeeping. They want proof of loyalty before you cash in on rental income. For some, it feels like protection. For others, it feels like punishment. Either way, if you're in Delaware, you need to check the documents before assuming you can pack your bags and hand over the keys to a renter.
At this point, you're probably wondering, why do HOAs even care so much about rentals? Like, why does it matter if my neighbor's house is occupied by a renter or the owner? A human is still paying to live there, right? Well, buckle up, because this is where the HOA's obsession with rentals finally makes sense. It's not just about noise or parties or Karen being annoyed at the extra car in the driveway. Nope. It's about stability, value, and, say it with me, money. Let's start with stability. HOAs want predictability. They want neighbors who recognize each other, not a rotating cast of strangers dragging suitcases every weekend. Think about it. Owners who live in their homes usually stay longer, care more, and join committees. Bless their souls. Renters, on the other hand, are often temporary. Not always, but often. And temporary means turnover, and turnover means the HOA feels like it's managing a revolving door. They don't want to be hotel staff. They want to be small-town mayors with long-term citizens. Now, stability ties directly into property values. This is the holy grail for HOAs. Everything they do, restrict rentals, fine you for your ugly mailbox, ban inflatable Santas in July, it all comes back to protecting home values. The thinking goes like this. Fewer rentals equals more owner-occupied homes, equals nicer yards, less noise, more community pride, equals higher values. And while that's not always true, perception is everything. If prospective buyers hear, "This place is too many rentals," they start imagining college kids throwing keggers and property values tanking. HOAs want none of that. But let's cut to the real heart of the matter. Financing and insurance. Banks and insurers love owner-occupied communities. Why? Because from their perspective, renters equal risk. More rentals equal more claims, more defaults, more wear and tear. It doesn't even matter if that's totally accurate. Lenders believe it, which makes it real in practice. In Delaware, just like everywhere else, mortgage approvals often depend on the percentage of rentals in a community. If too many homes are rented, certain loans, like FHA loans, become harder to get. That shrinks your pool of buyers, which drags down demand, which drags down values. The HOA knows this, so they freak out about rentals like your grandma freaks out when you leave the fridge open. Here's an analogy for you. Picture the housing market as a dating pool. A high owner occupancy rate is like having a great online profile with solid photos and a witty bio. Buyers, the dates, line up. A high rental rate, that's like admitting you still live in your parents' basement. Suddenly, the pool of dates shrinks and your chances take a nosedive. That's how lenders and buyers view communities with too many rentals. They swipe left. But HOAs don't just stop at protecting values. They also care about community reputation. Think about beach towns in Delaware. A community overrun with short-term rentals can feel more like a vacation strip than a neighborhood. Permanent residents start grumbling, "I didn't sign up to live in a hotel." Suddenly, the HOA has angry owners at every meeting demanding action. Restricting rentals isn't just about numbers, it's about keeping the pitchforks down and the peace treaties signed. Let's not forget about wear and tear. More renters usually mean more move-ins and move-outs, more U-Hauls, more furniture banging through hallways, more carpet stains in common areas. In condos or townhomes, that adds up fast. The HOA, which pays for repairs with your dues, doesn't want rental churn chewing through the budget. So limiting rentals is their way of saying, we'd rather spend your money on landscaping than fixing holes from someone moving a sofa up the stairs for the third time this month. And then there's rule compliance. Fair or not, HOAs often believe renters don't care as much about the rules. They didn't buy in, so why would they care if the trash can is left out or the Christmas lights stay up until March? Owners get annoyed, boards crack down, and soon enough the solution becomes fewer renters, fewer headaches. Whether that stereotype is fair is another story, but perception drives policy, and in HOAs, perception is king. Now, let's zoom back out to Delaware specifically. Communities here, especially near the beaches, are prime battlegrounds for this issue. Short-term rentals bring tourists, and tourists bring, let's just say, energy. Locals who moved for peace and quiet suddenly feel like they're living next to a spring break resort. Cue the outrage.
Boards respond with rental restrictions, citing, you guessed it, stability, values, and dollars. But here's the irony. Sometimes rental restrictions themselves can hurt values. Investors avoid communities with strict rules. Potential buyers who hope to rent out later might pass. And if too many people are barred from renting, those who can't sell or afford their mortgage may end up defaulting. That's right, restrictions meant to protect the community can backfire, lowering values instead of boosting them. Talk about a plot twist. Let's pose for a story. Imagine Sunny Shores, a fictional Delaware HOA. 10 years ago, rentals were wide open. Families rented for summer vacations, owners made bank, and life was good. Except for the noise complaints. The board panicked and slammed down a rule: no leases shorter than 12 months. Suddenly, the summer rental market evaporated. Investors stopped buying. Owners who had counted on seasonal rental income started defaulting. Property values dipped. The very thing the board wanted to protect, home values, ended up taking a hit. Moral of the story, restrictions are a double-edged sword. So, what's the homeowner takeaway here? Understand the why. HOAs fight rentals because they believe fewer rentals equal more stability and values. Whether you agree or not, that's the mindset. Know the impact on financing. Too many rentals in your community could affect loan options for future buyers and your resale price. Look at both sides. Restrictions may protect values in the short term, but they can also scare off buyers and investors. Stay involved. If your board is pushing rental restrictions, don't assume it's all bad or all good. Ask for data. Push them to show actual numbers, not just gut feelings. At the end of the day, HOAs fight rentals because they're protecting what they see as the golden trio: stability, property values, and financial health. Whether they're actually right or just paranoid depends on the community. But make no mistake, every HOA battle over rentals is really a battle over money wrapped up in the language of community character. So, now you know why HOAs go full gladiator mode on rentals. But what happens when you break the rules anyway? Get ready, because in fact number 7, we're talking fines, bans, and legal showdowns that make Judge Judy look tame.
So far, we've talked about how HOAs in Delaware set up the rules: governing documents, amendments, rental caps, lease minimums, and owner occupancy demands. But let's say you, bold rebel that you are, decide to break those rules anyway. What happens then? Does the HOA send a polite email saying, "Excuse me, kindly stop renting to that family of 5? Oh no. HOAs have teeth, and when it comes to rentals, they don't mind biting. Welcome to the world of HOA enforcement tactics. This is where fines, bans, and lawsuits come into play, or as I like to call it, how to turn your HOA from a neighborhood club into judge, jury, and executioner. Let's start with the most common weapon in their arsenal: fines. The nickel and diming begins. Think of fines as HOA currency. Break the rules, pay the toll. Maybe it starts small: $50 for unauthorized rental activity, then $100, then $250. Before you know it, your little side hustle is bleeding cash faster than a slot machine in Atlantic City. Some HOAs get creative with this. Instead of flat fines, they escalate. First offense, $50. Second offense, $200. Third offense, $500 per day until you comply. Yes, per day. That means every 24 hours your tenant stays, your bank account cries a little harder. And here's the kicker. In Delaware, if fines are backed up by the governing documents and enforced consistently, courts will uphold them. That's right. Those little slips of paper you ignored when you bought the house, they just became legal IOUs. But fines are just the opening act. Emanates... Emanates bans. What does that mean? Amenity bans. But fines are just the opening act. Amenity bans, the social exile. Let's say your HOA really wants to make an example of you. They can deny your tenants access to community amenities. No pool, no gym, no tennis courts.
Imagine paying $2,000 a month in rent only for your tenant to find out they can't even dip their toes in the pool. Who are they going to blame? Not the HOA. You. And let's be honest, that creates tension between you and your tenant. Suddenly, you're the bad guy, scrambling to explain why the HOA board thinks your renter doesn't deserve chlorine and treadmills. Spoiler, tenants don't care about HOA politics. They just want what they were promised. Some HOAs even extend the punishment to owners. Miss enough rules, and they'll suspend your own privileges, too. Want to book the clubhouse for your kid's birthday? No. Break rental rules, and you're socially exiled. Legal showdowns, when things get ugly. But fines and bans are just foreplay. When things escalate, HOAs aren't afraid to bring out the big guns. Lawsuits. Yes, your HOA can sue you for violating rental restrictions. They can drag you into court, ask for injunctive relief, forcing you to stop renting, and demand reimbursement for legal fees. And because Delaware courts respect HOA documents as binding contracts, the HOA often has the upper hand. Picture it, you standing in court clutching your "but it's my house" speech, while the HOA lawyer waves the governing documents like holy scripture. 9 times out of 10, judges side with the HOA if the documents are clear. Brutal? Yes. Legal? Absolutely. And don't forget about liens. If you rack up unpaid fines or lose a lawsuit, the HOA can attach a lien to your property. That means when you try to sell, refinance, or even transfer the deed, the lien has to be paid first. It's like a scarlet letter for your home, visible to every buyer and lender. Delaware's flavor of enforcement. Now, Delaware has its own quirks. Under state law, HOAs must give due process. That usually means notice of the violation, an opportunity to be heard, and a fair chance to respond. In practice, it looks like this. You get a violation letter. You get a chance to plead your case at a board hearing. The board deliberates, rolls their eyes, and enforces the rule anyway. Okay, maybe not always that cynical, but you get the idea. The key is that HOAs can't just slam you with fines out of nowhere. They have to follow procedure. But if they do, you're toast. The HOA Hall of Fame, creative punishments. Some HOAs get inventive. Beyond fines, bans, and lawsuits, they've been known to publish violators' names in the community newsletter. Yes, public shaming is alive and well. Tow vehicles if tenants aren't registered properly. Require pre-approval of leases and deny tenants who don't meet community standards. It's like living in a high school where the principal controls your parking space, your lunch table, and whether you can attend prom. Homeowner countermoves. Now, don't despair entirely. If you're in Delaware and you think your HOA is overstepping, you do have defenses. Check the documents. If the rule isn't properly adopted, you can challenge it. Demand procedure. If the HOA skipped notice or hearings, their enforcement might not stick. Lawyer up. Sometimes just having an attorney send a stern letter can make the board back down. But here's the thing. Fighting the HOA is expensive and exhausting. Most homeowners fold long before it gets to court, which is exactly what HOAs count on. The real power of enforcement. At the end of the day, enforcement isn't just about rules, it's about deterrence. HOAs crack down hard on violators because they want to send a message. Cross us, and this could be you. It's neighborhood theater. One unlucky homeowner gets smacked, and everyone else quietly falls in line. Think of it like traffic cops setting up speed traps. They don't catch everyone, but the sight of flashing lights makes everyone else slow down. Same logic here. The HOA fines one person $500, and suddenly nobody else is willing to risk it. Bottom line for Fact 7. HOAs enforce rental rules with fines, bans, lawsuits, and liens. Delaware law requires due process, but if the HOA follows it, they win most battles. Tenants often suffer when owners break rules, fueling resentment. Fighting back is possible, but it's costly and stressful. Enforcement is as much about making an example as it is about actual punishment. So, fines sting, lawsuits drain, and liens haunt. But what's the actual legal backbone for all of this? In Fact 8, we're pulling back the curtain on Delaware law itself, the framework that gives HOAs their rental superpowers.
All right, we've been talking a lot about what HOAs do, the rules they write, the hoops they make you jump through, the fines they gleefully slap on you. But let's zoom out and ask the big question. Where do they get this power from? Are HOAs just making it up as they go along? Or is there some actual law behind all this? Welcome to Delaware's legal backdrop, the part of the story that turns neighborhood drama into courtroom reality. Here's the thing. HOAs don't exist in a vacuum. They're not little monarchies, though sometimes they act like it. They're created and governed under state law. And in Delaware, the law that matters most for HOAs is called the Delaware Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, or DUCIOA. Try saying that 3 times fast. DUCIOA is basically the blueprint for how HOAs, condo associations, and other common interest communities operate. It covers everything from how boards are elected to how budgets are passed to, you guessed it, how rental restrictions can be created and enforced. Think of it like the real book for the rule book. Without it, HOA boards would be a free-for-all, and let's be real, things are chaotic enough already. So what does Delaware law actually say about rentals? Surprisingly, not as much as you think. DUCIOA doesn't outright ban or allow rentals. Instead, it puts the ball in the community's court. If the governing documents say rentals are restricted, that's enforceable. If they don't, the HOA has to amend them properly to impose restrictions. In other words, Delaware law is like the referee. It doesn't play the game, but it makes sure the players follow the rules. Let's break down the big legal takeaways for homeowners. Number 1, governing documents equal law of the land. In Delaware, your HOA's declaration, CC&Rs, and bylaws aren't just guidelines. Courts treat them as binding contracts. When you bought your home, you agreed to them, whether you read them or not. Spoiler, you didn't. So if the documents say no rentals under 12 months, that's as enforceable as a speed limit sign. You can dislike it, but you can't just ignore it. Number 2, amendments require due process. If the documents are silent on rentals, the HOA can't just invent a rule out of thin air. Under DUCIOA, they need proper procedure, notice to owners, a vote, usually a supermajority, and recording the amendment with the county. If they skip steps, the amendment may not hold up in court. This is where homeowners sometimes win battles, not on the substance of the rule, but on the sloppiness of how it was adopted. Number 3, due process for enforcement. Delaware law requires that HOAs give notice and an opportunity to be heard before enforcing penalties. Translation, they can't just drop a $500 fine in your mailbox with no explanation. They have to tell you what you did wrong, give you a chance to explain yourself at a hearing, and then make a decision. Now, will they actually listen to your excuse? Probably not, but at least the law forces them to go through the motions. Number 4, grandfathering is a gray area. One of the hottest issues in Delaware rental disputes is whether new restrictions apply retroactively. If you bought when rentals were allowed and the HOA later bans them, are you exempt? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Delaware law doesn't require grandfathering, but some courts lean that way if applying the rule retroactively feels unfair. It all depends on the amendment's wording and how it's enforced. Number 5, courts back HOAs. Usually. Here's the harsh truth. Delaware courts often side with HOAs when the documents are clear and the procedures were followed. Why? Because the entire premise of HOA living is shared governance. When you sign those papers at closing, you're basically agreeing to play by the collective's rules. Judges don't see it as oppression. They see it as you making a deal, even if you didn't realize you were signing away your dream of Airbnb riches. Now, let's pause for some real talk. Delawareans often think, it's my house, I can do what I want. And normally, yes,
property rights are sacred. But when you buy into an HOA, you're not just buying a house, you're buying into a community contract. And under Delaware law, that contract has teeth. So your rights as a homeowner, they come with fine print. Here's a fun analogy. Buying into an HOA is like joining a gym. Sure, you own your membership, but you also agree to the gym's rules. You can't just light up a cigar in the sauna because you own your body. Same with HOAs. You can't just rent your place to anyone for any length of time if the rules say otherwise. Your property rights exist, but they're shaped by the community you signed up for. Now, let's talk Delaware quirks. Unlike some states that heavily regulate HOAs, Delaware gives communities a lot of autonomy. That means rules vary wildly from one HOA to another. Some are chill and barely enforce anything. Others run their community like it's Fort Knox. The law says, as long as your documents say it and you did it right, go for it. So, two homeowners a mile apart could have totally different rental freedoms, depending on their HOA. But here's the good news. Delaware law also provides mechanisms for homeowners to challenge boards. If you think your HOA overstepped, you can request records and meeting minutes, demand proof of proper procedure, petition for votes to remove or replace board members, take the fight to court, though warning, it's costly. So while HOAs seem all-powerful, they're not invincible. The law does put checks on their authority, but only if homeowners are willing to push back. The bottom line on Delaware law. HOAs in Delaware get their rental restriction powers from their documents, backed by DUCIOA. The law doesn't decide rental rules, it enforces process. Governing documents equal contracts. Clear rules usually win in court. Sloppy amendments or lack of due process equal homeowner leverage. Grandfathering is possible, but not guaranteed. Courts usually side with HOAs when they've played by the book. So can Delaware HOAs stop rentals? Absolutely, if their documents say so. If they don't, they need to amend properly. And if they mess up the process, that's your opening. But never forget, when you buy into an HOA in Delaware, you're stepping into a legal framework that favors the collective. And in that game, the board is holding most of the cards. So we know the law gives HOAs their muscle. But what about homeowners who refuse to take no for an answer? Next up, in Fact 9, we're talking loopholes, workarounds, and the sneaky tricks people try to outsmart the HOA rental police.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how HOAs in Delaware flex their muscles when it comes to rentals. But let's be real. Homeowners aren't always willing to roll over and say, "Yes, board, whatever you say, board." Nope. When money's on the line, rental income, investment strategies, or just plain stubbornness, people get creative. Enter the world of workarounds and loopholes. This is where homeowners ask the eternal question, can I outsmart my HOA? Short answer? Sometimes. Long answer? It depends on the documents, the law, and how gutsy you are. Let's break down the tricks, the myths, and the don't even try this moves homeowners experiment with when facing rental restrictions. 1. They're not tenants, they're guests. Ah yes, the classic, your HOA bans rentals under 6 months, but you've got folks staying every weekend. How do you explain it? Simple. They're not renters, they're my guests. You might even hand them a house-sitting agreement or call it a short-term license instead of a lease. Will it work? Maybe for a while, but HOAs aren't dumb. If your guests keep dragging suitcases in and out, paying you through Airbnb and writing online reviews, the HOA will connect the dots. Delaware courts aren't likely to buy the guest argument if money's changing hands. If it walks like a rental and quacks like a rental, it's a rental. Nice try, though. 2. Renting to family. Some owners get clever. Okay, I can't rent to strangers, but what if I rent to my cousin or my in-laws or my best friend from college? It feels like a loophole, right? Not always. Many Delaware HOAs specifically allow exceptions for immediate family rentals. That means parents, children, or siblings can stay without triggering rental rules. But watch out, cousins, uncles, or that random family friend usually don't count. And if your HOA requires lease approval, they'll see right through it. The key here is knowing what your documents say. Some HOAs are generous with family exceptions. Others define family so narrowly you'd think they were writing a sitcom pilot. 3. The roommate play. What if you're still living in the house but want to rent out a room? Is that a rental or just a roommate? Delaware HOAs often carve out exceptions for owner-occupied rentals. If you're living in the property, bringing in a roommate may not count as a violation. But again, details matter. Some HOAs consider any exchange of money a lease. Others don't care as long as the owner's still living there. This loophole works best in communities where the HOA's biggest fear is absentee owners. If you're still present, they relax. If you're gone, they tighten the screws. 4. Corporate shell games. Here's where things get fancy. Some investors try to outsmart HOAs by creating LLCs or trusts. They buy the property under a company name, then lease it to themselves, claiming it's not technically a rental. Smart? Kind of. Legal? Maybe. Risky? Definitely. HOAs are wise to this game, and Delaware law tends to side with the intent of the restriction. If the spirit of the rule is no rentals, hiding behind an LLC won't save you. You'll just look like you watched too many episodes of Suits. 5. House swapping. This one's fun. Owners try to get around rental restrictions by engaging in house swaps. You go live in someone else's house while they live in yours. No rent exchanged. Technically, not a lease. True, but house swaps often consider any arrangement where the owner isn't living there a rental, whether money changes hands or not. Plus, house swaps are hard to keep secret. Neighbors notice when you suddenly disappear and randoms move in. 6. Claiming hardship. Some HOAs in Delaware have hardship exceptions. These allow owners to rent out their property temporarily if they face job relocation, military deployment, or serious financial stress. It's not a loophole so much as a pressure valve, but owners sometimes exaggerate their hardship to qualify. The board usually requires documentation, though, orders, contracts, or financial proof. So unless you're a really good actor with fake paperwork, don't do that. This loophole's hard to fake. 7. Playing the clock. Another trick, pushing the limits of minimum lease rules. If the HOA says 6-month minimum, some owners draft 6-month leases but end early with handshake deals. On paper, it looks compliant. In reality, it's a series of back-to-back short-term states. It might work until the HOA catches wind of constant turnover. Then you're busted. 8. Ignoring the rule altogether. Let's be honest, some owners just roll the dice and hope not to get caught. They rent under the radar, collect the checks, and pray the HOA is too lazy to notice. In small or inactive HOAs, this sometimes works. In active ones, forget it. All it takes is one nosy neighbor to blow the whistle, and suddenly you're on the receiving end of violation notices, fines, and possibly a lawsuit. 9. The legal loophole. Sometimes the loophole isn't about trickery, it's about sloppy documents. If your HOA's restrictions are vague, contradictory, or improperly amended, you might have a legitimate legal out. For example, if the documents say leases must be approved, but never define what lease means, you could argue short-term rentals don't count. Or if the HOA amended improperly, wrong quorum, bad notice, you might challenge the whole rule. Delaware courts won't uphold restrictions written like Swiss cheese. The big picture. So, can you outsmart your HOA? Occasionally. But it's a risky game. HOAs have lawyers, time, and usually more money than the average homeowner. They've seen most tricks before, and when they catch you, the punishment can outweigh the benefit. That said, some homeowners do win battles by exploiting vague language or forcing HOAs to follow the letter of the law, or others survive by flying under the radar in communities with weaker boards. But make no mistake, every loophole is really just a gamble.
Sometimes you hit the jackpot. Sometimes you go bankrupt. Homeowner tips if you're thinking loopholes. Read carefully. Your documents may have more wiggle room than you think. Ask for exceptions. Hardship, family rentals, and owner occupancy clauses may help. Don't get sloppy. HOAs love easy wins. If you're going to fight, make sure you've got a solid case. Weigh the risks. Fines, liens, and lawsuits can turn a clever workaround into a financial disaster. Bottom line for Fact9, homeowners love testing loopholes, from guests to roommates to LLC tricks. Some strategies work for a while, others crash and burn fast. Delaware law tends to side with HOAs if the intent of the rule is clear. The strongest loophole is often sloppy drafting or improper amendments. Outsmarting your HOA is possible, but it's like playing poker against the house, and the house usually wins. So, we've seen the tricks, the loopholes, and the battles. But what's next? Are Delaware HOAs headed for even stricter rental crackdowns? Or is the tide shifting with new laws and the rise of Airbnb? In fact, number 10, we're peeking into the future of rentals in Delaware, and trust me, it's one wild forecast.
We've marched through governing documents, amendments, caps, lease minimums, owner occupancy rules, fines, lawsuits, and even loopholes. But here's the big finale question. Where is all this headed? Because make no mistake, Delaware's rental wars aren't slowing down. They're evolving. And the future looks like a clash between tradition, HOAs clutching their rulebooks, and disruption, Airbnb, remote workers, and shifting housing markets. So grab your crystal ball. Let's peer into the HOA future. The Airbnb effect. If you want to understand where HOAs in Delaware are headed, just look at Airbnb. What started as a quirky air mattress rental in San Francisco has turned into a global juggernaut. In Delaware's beach towns, Rehoboth, Dewey, Bethany, short-term rentals have exploded. Tourists love them, owners profit from them. And HOAs? They see chaos. HOAs argue that Airbnb has turned neighborhoods into hotels. Strangers rolling in every weekend, parties spilling onto lawns, constant turnover. It's everything HOAs fear: instability, noise, and declining community character. Expect HOAs to keep doubling down on minimum lease requirements, 6 months, 12 months, to choke out short-term rentals. The Airbnb wars aren't cooling off, they're just heating up. State law on the horizon. Right now, Delaware leaves most of the rental drama to HOAs and local governments. But that could change. Across the country, states are stepping in. Florida, Arizona, and California have seen waves of state legislation limiting how much HOAs or cities can restrict rentals. Why? Because legislators see rental income as a property right, and property rights are politically explosive. Could Delaware follow suit? Possibly. As housing affordability tightens, legislators may step in to prevent HOAs from outright banning rentals. Don't expect a free-for-all, though. More likely, the state could set guardrails like guaranteeing homeowners the right to rent for a minimum number of days per year, even if the HOA frowns at it. Think of it as compulsory tolerance. The remote work ripple. Another game changer. Remote work. Delaware isn't Silicon Valley, but even here, the pandemic shifted housing trends. People are moving into communities full-time who used to just vacation there. Others are buying second homes, planning to rent them out part-time. HOAs that once assumed vacation rentals only happened in the summer now face year-round pressure. This blurs the line between long-term stability and flexible rental income. Expect HOAs to respond with ever more detailed rules about who can rent, when, and for how long. Technology and enforcement. The future of HOA enforcement is also about tech. Forget neighbor snitches. Boards are getting smarter. Some already use software to scrape Airbnb and VRBO listings, cross-checking addresses against their communities. Others hire firms that send out mystery shoppers to catch illegal rentals in the act. The days of hiding your listing by calling tenants guests may be numbered. Delaware HOAs are watching, and they've got the internet on their side. But here's the twist. Homeowners aren't just sitting back. As more people buy homes hoping to earn rental income, pressure is mounting to loosen the rules. Younger buyers in particular want flexibility. Retirees see rentals as supplemental income. And investors, well, they always want a piece of the action. Expect future HOA elections in Delaware to get even messier, with pro-rental and anti-rental factions duking it out like rival political parties. Your sleepy HOA board meeting could feel more like Congress during budget season. Insurance and lending trends. Remember how we said banks and insurers love owner-occupied communities? That's still true. But here's the wrinkle. Lenders are adapting. As rentals become more common nationwide, some banks are loosening rules. FHA and Fannie Mae still have caps, but private lenders are experimenting with new models. Insurance companies, too, are creating policies tailored to short-term rentals. Over time, the financial stigma around renters could fade. If that happens, HOA's favorite excuse, "we're protecting property values," might lose some bite. The local government factor. Don't forget about cities and counties. In Delaware, some municipalities already regulate rentals directly. Rehoboth, for example, has cracked down on short-term rentals with permits and occupancy limits. As local governments take the wheel, HOAs may not need to swing the hammer as hard. Why fight over Airbnbs in the clubhouse when the city is already issuing fines downtown? The future may involve a tag team, governments regulating rentals broadly, HOAs enforcing details locally. The middle ground future. So what's the most likely scenario? The future probably isn't all-out bans or total freedom. It's a messy middle. Delaware HOAs will keep allowing rentals, but with strings attached. Expect more caps on rental percentages, waiting lists that stretch for years, minimum lease terms of 6 to 12 months, owner occupancy periods before renting, lease approvals with background checks. In other words, the HOA future is less about no rentals and more about rentals, but only on our terms. It's not freedom, but it's not jail. It's HOA purgatory. Predictions for Delaware. Beach town wars will intensify. HOAs near the coast will fight Airbnb like it's an invading army. Suburban HOAs will tighten rules slowly. They'll focus on long-term lease minimums and owner occupancy. Legislators will step in. Don't be shocked if Delaware passes a rental rights law in the next decade. Technology will end stealth rentals. If you're posting online, your HOA will know, period. Homeowner pushback will rise. More lawsuits, more elections, more us versus them drama. So what homeowners should do? So if you're in Delaware, how do you prepare for the rental future? Read your documents now. Don't wait until you're on a waiting list in 2027. Stay politically active. HOA boards matter more than you think. Watch state law. A small bill in Dover could reshape your rental rights overnight. Adapt your strategy. If short-term rentals are blocked, consider mid-term or long-term leases. Keep receipts. If your HOA enforces sloppily, you might have a legal case later. Here's the ironic truth. The future of rentals in Delaware isn't about houses. It's about power. Power between owners and boards, power between HOAs and governments, power between tradition and disruption. And power, as always, comes down to money. So, can Delaware HOAs stop rentals forever? Maybe. Will homeowners stop fighting back? Not a chance. The battlefield is set, and the future promises more drama than your favorite reality show. Grab the popcorn. Bottom line for fact number 10. The future of Delaware rentals is shaped by Airbnb, remote work, tech, and state law. HOAs will keep restricting, but not eliminating rentals. Expect more middle ground compromises, caps, minimums, and approvals. Local and state governments may step in. The fight between homeowners and HOAs is far from over. And there you have it, 10 facts that pull back the curtain on Delaware's HOA rental wars. Now I want to hear from you. Does your HOA have wild rental rules? Drop your story in the comments. The crazier, the better. Don't forget to subscribe for more HOA drama breakdowns because, trust me, this saga isn't ending anytime soon.